What's up guys, back again with another video in the Spigot series. This time I'm going to show you how to use persistent data storage with your Minecraft plugins. Alright, so in 1.14 and above we have this thing called the persistent data container, and it has other few things that go along with it, but basically it's a way for you to store primitives and strings within blocks, items, and players, and it's really cool. And you can do other stuff besides those three, but those are the three main ones. And it's really powerful because currently if you want to store something, like let's say you make a plugin where you need to store the amount of times a player has killed another player, that's something you need to store either in a database or in a file, right? But with this, you can use Minecraft to store the data itself, so you don't have to rely on a database or working with files. This is actually still using files in the background because, of course, if you're storing something in a player file or a item or something like that, it has to be stored in the world, obviously, so it's still being stored in a file, but you don't have to worry about working with the file yourself. All you have to do is worry about using the API to work with the storage, not working with the files and all that complicated stuff or using a database. So anyway, if you're wondering how it works, basically every item, every block, and every player in Minecraft uses a storage format called MBT, and it's a way for you to store basically key value pairs. It's like JSON basically. You can look more into that if you want to. I'll leave a link for you in the description below. But if, for example, you can see the MBT data of a player if you want to. So you can do data get entity and then type your name, Cody Simpson 999. So now you can see all of my MBT data that is stored in my player data folder or file. And if you look closely here, you can see all these different values like bucket.update level, data version, XP level, score, position. It tracks all the important stuff that your player is, working with here. Your fire, whatever, rotation, dimension, on ground. It's storing all that information, right? So this is very important because, obviously the server needs to know, what your character is doing and everything like that. Store that information somewhere. So with the same idea in mind, we can use the persistent data API that Spigot provides to be able to add our own data to the MBT for either the player, the item, or a block. You can do all three pretty much, and you can also do boss bars too, but it's a little different. But those are the three main ones we're going to be working with, so let's see how we can do that. So we're going to start off by making a new project here real quick. Alright, so we got our project started up here. What we're going to do now is set up a simple command like we did last episode, just to test this feature out. So we're just going to do new Java class. We're going to call this store command. So what we're going to be doing with this command is we're going to be making a simple command that is capable of storing messages within items. So they're going to do /store, and then if there's an item in their hand, we're going to store an item message in that item using the MBT data with the persistent data API. So it's going to be really cool. And so player P is equal to player sender. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is check to see, well, first we want to do it like this. So we want the player to be able to do /store and then provide a message to store like I like pickles. So what that will do is if there's a item in the player's hand, it will store the message I like pickles on that item, so that the next time they run /store I like pickles or another message, it'll say you already have a message and it says I like pickles. So let's try achieving that. So the first thing we want to do here is check to see if they're providing the arguments that we want. So we want to make sure they're providing at least one argument for the message. So args.length is greater than 0, and if it's greater than 0, we want to first basically grab the item that they're holding. So item stack item is equal to p.getInventory.get item in main hand. So that will get the item in their main hand. They can be null, I think, right? Let's do control P here. It doesn't say, but it can be null. It says not null. I don't know, but if they're holding air, then there's going to be issues, but we'll just pretend that's not an issue for this tutorial. And now what we want to do is grab the item meta of this item, because that's where the persistent data container is for this item. So item meta is equal to item.getItem meta. And so now that we have the meta, we can grab the persistent data container. So we can do that with meta.getPersistentDataContainer, data container, as you can see here. And if you want to know how it works, you can do control Q and it gives you all the information. So that's pretty cool. So let's store that persistent data container in its own object. So persistent data container, we'll call this data, and it's going to be equal to meta.getPersistentDataContainer. data container. So now we can use this persistent data container to do three main things. We can either we can set a piece of data, we can see if it has a piece of data already, and we can also get a piece of data. So we're going to be using all three, but those are the three main things. And there's a few other things you can do, like get keys, get adapter, or whatever, all that stuff. But these are obviously the three main ones that you're going to be using here, and we're going to be using all three in this plugin tutorial. So the first thing we want to do is see basically if the item that they're trying to store a message inside of already has a message stored, right? So we'll do slash data, or data, we'll do if, data.has, and we'll say, well, first we need to provide a namespace key, and the namespace key is going to be basically the key, like I told you before, it's a key value pair. I closed the server, but the MBT data is basically a key value pair, just like JSON, if you're familiar with JSON. So you're going to provide a key to identify what you're storing, and then the value of what you're storing, basically. So it's like a map, basically, in Java, right? So we just need to provide a namespace key, which is an object, so we'll do new namespace key. And that namespace key needs two things. It needs a plugin, the instance of your plugin, and it also needs the key to identify what you're storing. So let's go ahead and make a way for us to get an instance of this plugin here. So we'll do private storing data plugin. That's what we'll call it. Then we'll go down here on plugin startup and do a plugin is equal to this. And then now we'll make a getter for this here. So static. So code generate getter. There we go. So now we've made a getter to grab the instance of the plugin. Let me move this down here. Alright, cool. So now we can grab the instance of the plugin. So let's go back here to namespace key. And that's the first parameter we need. So we'll do storing data.getPlugin. And now we need to provide the key of what we're identifying the data with. So let's call this message, right? Because we want to store a message inside of the item, right? So now we need to do comma after we provide the namespace key. And now it needs a persistent data type. Okay, so we can do persistent data type, and we have all these data types here, and pretty much all of them are just, you know, regular old primitives, but you also have a string here. In this case, obviously, we're just trying to store a message inside of an item, right? So we will just use a string, right? Because it's a message. All right, so that's all you need for the has method here. All you need is the namespace key to identify what you're storing, and then you also need the data type of what you're storing. So if the persistent data container of that item already has the message, then we want to say something like p.sendMessage chat color gray. There is already a message stored in this item. Okay, something simple like that. Import chat color. Cool. So now then we'll print out the message that they have stored. So we'll do p.sendMessage, and we'll say chat color.gray message chat color.green. And now to get the message that they have stored, we can do pretty much the same exact thing. So we'll do data to access the persistent data container of the item, and then we'll do get. So this time we're getting the value of what's stored there, and do new namespace key, and then we want to provide the instance of the plugin. So storing data.getPlugin. And then now we want to get the identifier of what we're trying to get, so message. And then finally we want the data type of what we're trying to get. So persistent data type.string. And yeah, that should do the job, right? So just fix that. And what that should do is return a string of whatever messages is stored inside of that item, and just print it out to the user after saying message in green. So there we go. And then else, if there's not a message already in this item, then what we want to do is store one. So data.set new namespace key, and we want to provide the same thing. So storing data.getPlugin, and then the thing that we want, the identifier, so message, and then we want to say the data type, so persistent data type.string, and then we need one more thing, and the third parameter is going to be the actual value that you are storing. So what we need is the message. So they're going to be providing this as an argument, so we want to basically construct all the arguments we provide, turn that into one string, and then store that string. So we can use a string builder for that. It's a pretty simple process. So we'll do string builder message is equal to new string builder, and we want to do basically loop through all of the arguments that they provided and append it to that message. So for args, well no, we'll do string args, so a simple loop here. And so for each argument of the args that were provided in the command, we can do message.append arg, and then plus a space, a space in between words, obviously. So that should do the job for us. And then we can go down here now that we have, got the message, we can do message dot toString. So that should convert the string builder into a string, and it should have the entire message stored. So now that we have stored it inside of the item using the persistent data container, what we need to do is update the metadata of the item. So we'll do we want to do item dot set item meta, and then provide the meta, which is what we have here, obviously. Okay. So after we do that, we want to then do p.send message chat color dot green and say message stored. Alright, so what this is doing basically is if there is a message already, we want to say there is a message stored in the item already, and then we want to print to them the message that is already stored. If there is not a message stored in the item already, we want to get the persistent data container of the item, put the message inside of it, put the identifier of message, and then we want to update the metadata. So we're using the persistent data container to set the data, then we're using the metadata and then applying that to the item. So the item has been updated, and then we're sending them a message saying the message has been stored. So hopefully that all makes sense. It's a pretty simple process. Basically, these three methods are all you need to pretty much store the data and retrieve the data and see if the data is already there. So it's pretty simple. So let's test this out now. What I want to do first is, well, we need to register the command, obviously. So let's go to storing data, then go to our main here. So git command, we'll call this store, executor, new store command. Alright, cool. So that should do the job for us. And now we want to, of course, register in the plugin.yml. So commands, store, description, store a message in an item. Pretty simple stuff. So now I'm going to run this, compile this, and I'll see you in the server so we can test it out. Okie dokie, we're in the server now. So what we're going to do is get an item. We'll use this polished diorite block, and we're going to store a message inside the item. So /store. Let's try providing no parameter. Nothing happens because we didn't tell it to do anything when we provide no parameter. We can change that. So go down here, put an else, and say p.send message chat color red. Provide a message to store. Okay, so anyway, now we can go back here and try it. So we'll do /store, and now we'll provide a message. I am cool, and it says message stored. So now let's try dropping the item, picking it back up, /store blah blah blah, and it says there is already a message stored inside this item. I am cool. So as you can see, it's very, very awesome. So as you just saw, even though I dropped the item, the message was still stored in the item when I picked it back up, and even if I turn the server off right now and then turn it back on, the message will be still stored inside the item because it's stored inside the file of wherever these items are, kept track of. I guess in the world folder, you have all the, block data and all that stuff, the item data and all that. So that's where it's stored. So we don't have to worry about all that stuff. All we have to worry about is if it's storing correctly using the Spigot API. So it takes away, or it introduces a layer of abstraction for you, so you don't have to worry about all the file mechanics and all that stuff, so which is pretty cool. So what I'm going to do now is put this item into a chest, and then I'm going to restart the server to see or prove to you that the block data will still be on the item. So I'm going to restart real quick. Alright, I'm joining back right now. Let's open the chest, grab the item, and now we'll do /store. /store. And now it says there is already a message stored in this item. I am cool. So as you can see, it's indeed persistent because even though the server is turning off and everything like that, the RAM is cleared up for the server. The data has been persisted into the file structure, and it's grabbed back and then put back into the item whenever the server starts up. So it's persistent. And yeah, so that's how it works. So we can even, like I said, use this for players, so we can store random data within players too, which is pretty powerful if you think about it, how you can use that in your plugins. And you can also store it in blocks. I'm not going to show you how to do blocks because it's pretty much the exact same thing as doing it with the items. So you can play around with that on your own if you want to. And I'll probably be doing it in my future videos too. I'll show you at some point an example of doing that. But yeah, I'm going to show you how to do it with players now. So let's go back to our plugin here. And so what I want to do is make a simple listener here. We'll call this the death listener. And we want to make it so that whenever the player dies, they, it counts, how many times the player has died, basically. We want to keep a counter of that inside of the player data. So implements a listener. Yeah, so every time the player dies, we want to see how many times they died and then increment that by 1 value and then let them know they died, however many times basically. So let's try doing that. So if event handler public void on death, and we want to do player death event E. Alright, so first thing we want to do is grab the player. So player P is equal to e.getEntity. And now let's grab the persistent data container of that player. So persistent data container, we'll call it data again, is equal to p.get persistent data container. So we can use this persistent data container to store stuff within the player, and we don't actually have to use any metadata like we did with the item, of course, because it's not an item, it's just a player. So we can just directly access and edit it without having to update anything like that. So it's pretty cool. So let's get there. Well, first let's do something else. So let's make another method here called public void on join. And what we want to do is basically, I've done this before, but on my other plugins, but we want to make it so that whenever the player joins, if they don't already have this, data that we're about to store, then we want to add it to their player basically. So let me show you. So we're going to do player P is equal to e.getPlayer, and we'll say if p.get persistent data container dot has, and we'll say new namespace key. So we need an instance of the plugin now, so storing data.get plugin. And now we need the name of the key that we want to check to see if it exists or not. We'll call this death count. And now we want to get the data type of that. So persistent data type, and we'll store it as an integer because it's just a simple number. So and we'll make this not, so the opposite. So basically what this is going to mean is if the player does not have the death count key inside of their player data, then we want to put one there. So we'll do p.get persistent data container dot set new namespace key storing data.get plugin. Death count is the name of what we want to store, and then persistent data container, nope, not that. We want to persistent data type dot integer, and then now we want to provide the integer, so we'll put 0. So basically what that means is when they join, if they don't already have the death count value key stored inside of their player data, we want to store a death count key with the value of 0 because they haven't died yet. It's their first time joining apparently, or we can assume basically. And so yeah, that's how that works. Pretty simple. So this will basically make sure that every player has their own death count key, and we don't have to worry about checking to see if the key exists already inside of this listener here. So we can access that value inside of here with confidence that exists basically, right? Because we know that as they join, they'll be assigned the value if they don't have it. So we can do int kill count, I'll make this capital C, is equal to data.get persistent, data.get new namespace key. And then of course do this again, so storing data.get plugin, death count, and then now we want to give the data type. And so what that's going to do is grab the integer value of their kill count, so how many times they have died, or we'll call this death count. That would make more sense, right? So how many times they have died, and it's going to store that into the integer here. And now we'll do death count plus plus because they have just died, so we want to increment that. So now we'll just send them a message saying you have died and tell them how many times they have died total. So send message chat color red, you have died, and we'll say times, so death count times. So now what we want to do is update the value inside of our persistent data container for the player, because we have just incremented it by 1, but we haven't incremented the data that's actually stored there basically, right? So we'll do data.set new namespace key storing data.get plugin, death count, and then persistent data type integer, and then provide death count as the parameter for the third one for the value. And that's it. So that's all you got to do for that. Alright, so that's pretty simple. So what this will do basically is as they join for the first time, it'll say if they don't already have the death count value stored inside of their persistent data container for the player, then we want to add it for them and then provide the value, the default value of 0. And then if they die, we want to get how many times they've died by accessing the data of death count inside of their persistent data container, and then increment that by 1 because they've just died, of course. And then we want to tell them how many times they have died. And then finally, we want to set that new value inside of the persistent data container so we can update, how many times they have died. So hopefully that all makes sense. That's how you can work with player persistent data containers. So let's go back into our main class here and update or add the listener for this. So get server.get plugin manager register events new store or death listener and then this. So that's all you need to do for that. So let's go ahead and jump in the server and see if it works. Alright, so I /reloaded the server, so everything's updated, hopefully. So now I just need to rejoin so that I can make sure that I have the death count value stored inside of my player data, because I haven't, rejoined yet. And so now I can assume that my death count is 0 inside of it, because I just, joined for the first time that this plugin has been working. And so it's going to be, actually we can see now, if we do /data get entity Cody Simpson, we can see the data inside of here. Well, first of all, you can see storing data message, I am cool, for this block here, which is pretty awesome. But you can also see the death count here somewhere. We just got to find it. There we go, storing data :death count, and we can see that it stores the value of 0 right here. So as you can see, it's actually working. So now let's try killing ourselves. So kill Cody Simpson. Now we have died. And it says you have died 1 times. I spelled times wrong, but you get the point. So now we can do data again. So data get entity Cody Simpson, and we can see that it says storing data :death count is 1. So it has incremented successfully. So no matter how many times we die, it's just going to keep updating that for us, so we know it works, which is pretty cool. And like I said, if I was to rejoin the server, well, I didn't say that, but if I was to rejoin the server, you can see that if I kill myself again, it's able to grab that data, and it knows I died 3 times because it was able to grab the data from the persistent data container of the player, then update it, then set it, and it's going to be stored inside of the player data inside of the world. So everything's saved persistently. So awesome. Alright, so that's pretty much it. That's all I want to show you for this episode. Now you know how to store data persistently using the Spigot and Bucket API. You don't have to worry about databases and working with files anymore, which is pretty awesome. You can do some pretty powerful stuff. If you have any questions about what I showed you this episode, feel free to leave a question in the comment section below or join our Discord server. We have a big Discord server with over 1,300 members last time I checked, so if you need any help at all with your programs, you can hop into one of these help channels and get some help. You can also just hang out and get some new friends if you want to, so just make sure you click the invitation in the description below. Don't forget, in the description below, I'll also leave a link to the code for this episode, so you can come back to it at any time and use it as a reference. I'll leave good detailed comments around the code so you can have a good explanation in text form too, in case you don't want to watch my awesome videos again. One final thing I want to tell you about: if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for as low as 99 cents a month. If you join, you can get cool perks like a special Discord rank on my server, early access to these videos, and you get shouted out like you see on the screen right now. If that sounds good to you, feel free to join for, like I said, as low as 99 cents a month. Alright, that's it. So thanks for watching. If you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe. And peace.